Hi, everybody. Thank you very much for the invitation and for letting us join the user group meeting today. It's very exciting for us to be here. We're going to start with with just introducing who we are. And so we'll go to the next slide and Dar will introduce herself and then I'll introduce myself.
Yes, except that my slideshow just disappeared. Give me 1 second. Google is misbehaving on me. Give me 1 second. Google
Can I
decided to
just say,
play
I don't know if
me.
anybody else has got a problem. Dara, I find you really quiet. I don't know if anybody
Let me
has
see.
that.
Might be my headphones. Is that better?
That's a bit better, yeah. Thanks.
Okay, sorry. Let me reshare. Google decided to crash on that screen on me. Great.
Do you need me to
All
present,
right.
Dar?
No, I think it's okay as long as it doesn't crash out on me again. Everyone should be able to see it. All right. And everyone can see again, yes? All right. Intros. I can go first. My name is Veverka. I am a migration solution architect and program manager for Nonprofit Cloud, which is a whole lot of words. I now work for Salesforce. Some of you know me and may not realize I'm at Salesforce now. I was a senior solution architect for an SI. Got about 27 years in tech, 13 of that at nonprofits as an IT exec, about 10 using Salesforce, and I live in Baltimore, Maryland, which if you're not familiar with the US, I'm on the East Coast, about an hour north of Washington, D.C., and I'm a hiker and I herd cats pretty much. I have 5 cats. Mika has abandoned. She was back there. I was going to introduce her, but she decided she didn't want to see the presentation. And over to Toby.
Yep. So my name is Toby Ward. I also work for SI partner, Galvin Technologies. I am a nonprofit cloud solution architect, and I also have Agentforce and Data Cloud and Tableau in my portfolio. I've been working with nonprofits in international and a domestic context for about 25 years. Until about 10 years ago, I was technology agnostic and used what tools were available. And then about 10 years ago, I got into the Salesforce ecosystem and have not set up a server since. And I'm pretty happy about that. I have lived and worked in Europe, Central America, Southern Africa, as well as now in the United States for the past few years. All right, today what we're going to talk about is nonprofit cloud. I assume if you are here that you have at least heard of it, but we'll go through and we'll cover the nonprofit cloud and kind of give a little grounding and a level setting for what it is. And then we're going to introduce the nonprofit cloud best practices team. We're going to introduce a product that team has developed called the Asset Hub, and then we're going to treat the rest of this as what this group has provided to us. As some of us were going through the first few implementations of nonprofit cloud, it was a new product. There wasn't a lot of good documentation. And there was nobody out there who really knew exactly what to do as we migrated from this product that we had been working with for 15 years in some cases. And so it was the ground had kind of shifted under us and everything was unsettled. And it was really for many of us kind of felt like we were going a little nuts. And as we started going through this through this project, we started to treat those things as group therapy. And when I joined these group meetings every couple of weeks, I could just kind of take a breath and talk to people who were going through the same thing as I was and just check that it wasn't me who was missing things and there was really some difficulty. So that's where the title of this presentation came from, and that's where the title of some of the next sections that we kind of wanted to do this as a presentation around we can't reproduce those biweekly therapy sessions, but we tried to put this together as a self-help book. So we'll go through and we'll talk about um, party relationship groups, person accounts, uh, relationships, and you. We'll talk about extension objects, exploring codependency. We'll get over our fear of commitment together as we talk about fundraising, and then we'll talk about some of the things that you might feel are being forced on you and how you can appropriately say no to some of the things that are part of Nonprofit Cloud and make some choices about what's most valuable to you. So with that said, we will launch into our presentation. Next slide. There we go. So what is Nonprofit Cloud? If you want to kind of give a thumbs up or use the emojis for everybody who has at least explored a little bit of Nonprofit Cloud, just to have us get a sense of what that looks like. I can't see everybody, but I'm putting it in. I see a couple of Nonprofit Cloud curious folks here. This was a product released by Salesforce in March of 2023, and in October of 2023, fundraising was added to the product. This is a move from the managed packages that we have become familiar with in the nonprofit community, that were a lot of them developed by the community and installed on top of Salesforce. And this move has brought all of the objects and processes needed to manage nonprofit operations, whether that be fundraising, whether that be program management, whether that be case management, whether that be outcomes management, or even grant making. All of those have been brought onto core, which gives them the same object standing. And the same object standing is a positive and a little bit of a negative sometimes as the accounts and opportunities, because now they are competing with some of the legacy interests of all of those things that are out there. And so it's the industry solution for nonprofits and grant makers, and it gives us the same industry standards. Industry standing as finance industry, insurance, automotive, manufacturing, some of those types of things. So we're able to leverage and have access to a lot of the things that have been developed for all of those different industries over the past few years. So it is a whole new world, and it's really, really exciting. It can be unsettling. So we're going to go through and hopefully give you a little bit of firm ground to stand on. And I'll turn it over to Dar to talk a little bit about how this came about.
Toby, I think you were going to do this one. I can do this. I can do this slide.
Oh. Okay. So the next thing I want to introduce is the Commons program. The Commons program is, I think, something that many folks here are fairly familiar with, but these are community-based sprints for open source development of products that support the nonprofit community, the education community, and there are over 2,000 people who have participated over the past few years, and there are 40 community-led products or projects. Those projects are things that you might be familiar with in the system. So one of the projects is managing the declarative lookup rollup summary, or as we like to call it, Dolores. One of them is summit events. Over the years, outbound funds, the core of grant making. was developed by this program. And there are many, many other exciting initiatives, including the nonprofit best practices and the asset hub that we've produced. And now I get to turn it over to Dar to hear her talk about the nonprofit best practices group.
We've done the presentation a few times, and sometimes we get the order mixed up. All right, for nonprofit cloud best practices, so that's the group that Chip and I are a part of. You might hear me refer to it as NPC-BP during this presentation, just because it's a lot of words. And that started because we realized that NPC was going to need kind of community involvement, just like NPSP did when it first came out. For those not familiar with the history of NPSP, it actually took 5 years to get from version 1 to version 3 of NPSP and to really get that product stable. And now that it's stable, there's actually a set of community best practices that Salesforce applies on top of NPSP when you get an NPSP org spun up, and that came out of the commons in an environment like this. So we thought we would do the same thing for nonprofit cloud. So I also want to note that when I'm speaking during this presentation, I'm talking about the nonprofit cloud best practices group. I don't have my Salesforce hat on. I'm a volunteer just like Toby, so I've got my NPC BP hat on. I can stick my Salesforce employee hat back on during Q&A, but during the presentation, when I say we, I'm talking about the best practices group. So our work has resulted in the Community Assets Hub, and I've got a screenshot of it up on the screen, and I'm going to put the URL for it in the chat for folks. If you want to explore it, there's also a QR code on the corner of the slide that will take you straight to the hub as well. It's basically a GitHub Pages site, and we host a number of items that the group has created, and we're always creating more stuff on it. And the slide highlights some of our major items that we have up there so far. So we have fundraising use cases, and that's where we kind of show you how to map out donation scenarios and how you would build that in nonprofit cloud. We've got a whole set of NPSP to NPC translation charts. We've got them for stakeholder management, fundraising, grant making, and program management, and then we're working on case management. And that will show a particular function, like say how households are modeled or how you do a gift payment, and it'll list the object for that function for NPSP, and then how you would do that in NPC. So that way, if you're familiar with NPSP, you can learn how it's done in NPC with some handy charts. We also have a lot of best practices and tips for fundraising, stakeholder management, and campaigns. And then we've also started developing templates and downloadable items. So we have our first package of stakeholder management flows with about 7 flows in it. Plus, we've got report types and custom reports in there for you around stakeholder management. I should note that NPC does not come with report types or custom reports due to a particular technical limitation. So those have to be done from scratch. So the NPC BP Hub has started providing those and putting reports up for folks so you don't have to make it from scratch. We've also got templates for loading party role relationships directly into your org. We took the program management mapping workshop that some of you might be familiar with from NPSP. We translated that to NPC and published it. And everything we do is public. It's always free. The group is all volunteer, so everything we do will always be free. Over to Toby.
So we're going to jump right into some of the areas that we've addressed in the nonprofit cloud best practices group. I'll almost never call it NPC, but NPC BP because I can't remember the order of the letters and I'll get it wrong eventually. So I'll call it. I'll use all the words. We're gonna talk about 3 components of modeling relationships, and that is party relationship groups. And this is the way to address households, clubs, the types of associations that you might not create, might not be an actual organization, but might be a grouping of people. We'll talk about person accounts, and we'll talk about the real standout benefit that you get from nonprofit cloud, and that is the modeling of rich relationships in the system. We'll hit the next slide. So at the core of this is Emma. Emma is a person, and as I interact with her as a person. I don't necessarily know anything about Emma except for her name, her email address, maybe her physical address, and that she interacted with us in a volunteer capacity, or she interacted with us in as a donor. And in Nonprofit Cloud, I don't need to know anything additional about Emma, except for that she's a person and I'm interacting with her. And so that's the core of what happens in Nonprofit Cloud. You don't have to use person accounts in Nonprofit Cloud if you're using only program management as one component, but there are certain parts of it that do require you to use person accounts. Fundraising is the main one that has that requirement. And so what we found as a best practice is it's best to go ahead and turn on person accounts and start getting over your fear of all of the years that people said, oh, never touch that turn on person accounts button. It's okay. We've been we've been doing it for a while now, and it really does give you some interesting pieces. The one thing I'll call out here is that when you have a person account, the contact object doesn't go away. It's just subsumed into this person account object. And so all of the ways that you would interact with contacts before are still available. And in fact, we always encourage people to make sure that they are putting contact fields on the contact object, and have Salesforce take care of making them part of the person account. And so the next thing that you might see as we move through DAR is we might want to model relationships that Emma has in her personal life. So we might want to understand whose spouse, who is Emma's spouse, or we might need to understand who her children are. And we might have a logical grouping here that says this is a family or this is a household, but we don't need to treat them as a household if we don't interact with them as a household. We just need to know who they're related to. This is, this is an emergency contact. This is a parent who's authorized to pick up my child. All of those types of things. We can do that without going to a household. If we click the next slide, though, we can look at other types of relationships that are part of the fabric of information that we might have around Emma. She might be an employee of Salesforce, and that is that relationship that we're used to having to use if we are not using Nonprofit Success Pack, having to look at Emma through who she is employed by. Or through her primary account relationship. Here we can understand that Emma's importance to us, and the ways that we need to know things we need to know about Emma may include other organizations besides just her employer. So she might be a board member at Aid Foundation, and Aid Foundation is actually how we interact with Emma, and Salesforce is really a secondary kind of bit of information. And so we do have that ability to leverage that same account contact relationship that we used we've used for a long time to model those relationships with a business account. If we hit the next slide, we can look at some other relationships. We may want to know and interact with this logical grouping of people as a household. That is, we may be sending direct mail, and we want to send one piece of mail to this logical grouping of people. And so we may set up a party relationship group that includes all of those folks, and we may look at something like the total donations that they've given, the total number of volunteer hours that they've provided as a unit. Those types of things are things that we might want to know about the Smith family. So we can still utilize that household, but we don't have to. It's not something that has to happen for every contact in our org. We don't need to know what their household household looks like. And in many cases, we don't know what their household looks like, and we're making it up anyway. And so if you hit the next slide, we'll talk about another type of relationship. The relationship in this one is new, is also new to nonprofit cloud, and something that takes a little bit of getting used to. This is being able to model relationships between party relationship groups or between business accounts. And so now we can have a relationship and we can understand that the Parsons family is another household and they are neighbors of the Smith family. They live in the same neighborhood. Or that attorneys at law is the family attorney of the Smith family. So we may want to know what business relationships to businesses have, and in the industry clouds, we can do that. You hit the next slide. This can get crazy. Whoop, if you want to go back, there we go. This can get a little nuts if you start to really follow it to its logical conclusion, because we can put we can say that John is a part of a running group that is doing some fundraising, and we can talk about who else is in that running group with John, and we can model all of those relationships. And so this is something that can really spiral and get. I always think of this when somebody standing in front of a board with red strings all over the place. Is the image I get when I really think of how far out this can go. But in some cases, you may need that kind of level of detail and understanding the rich network of relationships. And in nonprofit cloud, you can do it. Now we're going to turn over, and I'm going to show you what this would look like in nonprofit cloud. These types of relationships are many to many relationships in some cases. And so one of the things that we need to do is understand how to model or have a tool to help model many to many relationships, and and skipping over in some cases those junction objects. And just understanding that if we're looking at the Weasleys here and we're looking at the Weasley household, we might, if we're looking at Arthur Weasley, we might see that he's related to Ron, Charlie, Bill, Jenny, and a couple of other children, and that he is married to Molly. We can see them as a household. We can see the group detail on the Arthur and Molly Weasley household, and then we can see the group members and who is actually living in the household at that point in time. As we go forward into some of the child members of this household go out into the world and create their own households. We can split these. If they move back, we can merge these households. So there's a lot of really exciting things that we can do as we go through this. And what you're looking at is one of the industry standard tools that we have access to, and we'll talk about a little bit later, but this one is called an Actionable Relationship Center, or an ARC, and it's a way to create graphs. And this is a really simple representation of what it can look like, and it can get much more rich as we go forward. The resources that we have around this are some templates for starting up those relationships and defining some of those relationships to help you load some of the data that drives that. And then we also have put together a few flows that we think are necessary, because as you can tell, there are lots and lots of objects, and going through and creating each of those objects starts to get a little bit repetitive. And if it's repetitive, human nature is it's generally just not done, and so it results in bad data. So we've put together a few things that we think really help in creating some of the reciprocal relationships that are necessary to support this, as well as a flow to automatically convert a contact to a person account if a contact is accidentally created in the system. We have a flow that converts that. There's another one that we're working on, and this is always in progress, that creates the same thing for if somebody accidentally creates a contact with a direct business account relationship and creates the necessary records to convert that to a person account with an account contact relationship. So that is what's available from the hub. And then we will turn it over to Dar to talk about extension objects.
Back over to me. All right, this is another area where we find that when people get introduced to nonprofit cloud, they struggle a little bit. So we're going to look at extension objects and exploring codependency. First off, what are extension objects? If you're not familiar with nonprofit cloud, or even if you are, you might not have heard this term. Extension objects are objects that have fields we might normally expect to land on one of the core Salesforce objects like account or contact or campaign or opportunity. And some examples of these extension objects are donor gift summary, contact profile, and outreach summary. Those are some of the more popular ones. So why do these exist in nonprofit cloud and in other industry clouds? It's not just nonprofit cloud. So I have one of the pages from the hub up on the screen, and what I have highlighted, it talks about some of the fundamental design differences between nonprofit cloud and nonprofit success pack. And the line I have highlighted is why these objects exist. In NPSP, you're dealing with a managed package. So when you build in a managed package, everything is a custom object or a custom field or a custom code. If you feel like adding 100 custom fields onto the account object in your managed package, go for it. You can do that. It's your managed package, and you can splatter those all over account if you want to. But when you're building on core, and nonprofit cloud is built on core, as Toby mentioned earlier in the presentation, all industry clouds are built on core. You don't get to splatter 100 fields all over the account object, because that affects absolutely everyone that is using Salesforce, because that's a core object. So you probably have noticed over the years, very few new fields get added to the big core objects like account or contact or opportunity or campaign. You rarely see new fields appear there. And so all of the industry teams, and really all of the internal subject type teams, everyone wants to get their fields onto those objects. But you can't, because you could break automations that would affect literally every Salesforce customer. So what is a poor Salesforce engineer on the industry clouds team supposed to do with all of these fields that we need to be delivered with the product? Thus, you end up with extension objects, because these fields have got to go somewhere. We can't just leave out all of householding or all of gift summary rollups out of nonprofit cloud. Those are critical functions. They need to be delivered with the product. So you end up with extension objects. And that's one of the ways that nonprofit cloud and other industry clouds deal with this. In terms of nonprofit cloud, I'm putting up a couple examples on the screen. Outreach summary is one of those extension objects. And so is donor gift summary. And what we're looking at, one of the ways that nonprofit cloud deals with this, is using a special Lightning Web component called the related record detail display. You don't have to remember that name. It's often referred to as R2D2. And this shows the related fields from those extension objects and makes it a nice display onto the object that they're tied with. They're related to the object they're tied to in a unique one-to-one relationship. So a donor gift summary is always a one-to-one to an account. An outreach summary that I've got over on the right is always a one-to-one with a campaign. For the extension objects, a lot of them are going to be roll-up objects like donor gift summary or outreach summary, but there's others. Toby just talked about households. One of the objects in use there is the party relationship group. That's an extension object. Contact profile is an extension object. And these hold fields that you would normally want to put on account, but you can't. When you're dealing with nonprofit cloud, some of the extension objects, like say contact profile, you can probably ignore. You're probably going to want to move the fields like demographics onto contact or account, because maybe you've got a marketing automation tool that plugs in. So some of the extension objects you can safely get away with ignoring. Others are really critical and you really can't ignore them, like donor gift summary or like party relationship groups. So in terms of the roll-up objects, the way they make these work, since you've got two objects you're dealing with, one that has the donor gift summaries and then your account. And if you think back to NPSP, if you're used to that, you know that the roll-ups appear on the contact or the account. So to manage those rollups between the two objects, you use a tool called data processing engine. And that replaces what we know as customized rollups in NPSP. It's got some pretty cool stuff. It does a lot more than the customized rollups in NPSP. It can do all sorts of things. It actually offloads processing onto the Einstein Analytics platform. So it processes things in much larger volumes and much faster, but it's also a little bit more complex to work with. But that is some of the out-of-the-box functionality that's going to be very different when you're dealing with NPSP. In terms of the Nonprofit Cloud Best Practices Hub, we're not going to be providing tools on data processing engine and customizing templates to do rollup because there's just too many ways that could go. Every nonprofit might want a unique set of fields for rollups added to the base ones, and that's just really too complex to get into. So we're not going to be providing assets on that. We would like to do some documentation around the out-of-the-box data processing engine definitions for rollups like donor gift summary. Some of those are pretty complex with over 70 nodes in them and not great documentation. So that's one area that we look at that we might be providing resources for on the hub. The other way that extension objects can be really tough for people when they're learning Nonprofit Cloud is reporting. Because when you want to do a report on rollups, you're not just dealing with a bunch of fields that have landed on the person account that you can then pull into reports. You've got the donor gift summary and the person account that you now need to pull into for the report. And when you're building that report, if you think about the report builder in Salesforce, there's nothing below an extension object in the report builder. So you can only add one level deep with an extension object. You can't jump to anything below it. So that can make reporting more complex. And that is one of the areas where the Nonprofit Cloud Best Practices group is working on that, is doing some work. We have an entire reporting subgroup. As I mentioned earlier, Nonprofit Cloud and some of the other industry clouds don't come with reports built in because of a technical limitation. So we've started building those out as part of the reporting subgroup, and we're going to have them packaged up probably by the end of the summer. We started with fundraising, so we'll have a whole set of base fundraising reports and reports that go with that that will make life with extension objects a little bit easier for folks in Nonprofit Cloud. Back over to Toby.
And talking about fundraising and fundraising reports, we're going to dig into one of the core areas for Nonprofit Cloud and just talk a little bit about how fundraising has changed in this new product. So we're going to talk about getting over our fear of commitments, and the way that we'll talk about this is just to note that stalwart object that we've been putting all kinds of pressure on for a lot of years, that opportunity representing the whole interaction of solicitation, commitment, and fulfillment of a donation, whether it be a major gift, grant, or whatever else it was. In Nonprofit Cloud, the opportunity gets to return to its core competency, which is managing the solicitation process. So we've added 2 more objects to the fundraising suite of objects and things and processes that can be managed. And I generally talk about them as the solicitation process, the commitment process, and the fulfillment process. And noting that we have lots of different types of donation models that happen, I'm going to start over here on the right. We might have a transaction that just comes across our desk. This could be something from a fundraising platform, or this could be something that is represented by a check that lands on your desk and needs to be put into the system. In this case, we don't need to create an opportunity for it because we didn't solicit this directly. We didn't make an individual ask for this donation. We made a mass market ask, and that resulted in a transaction, or it just happened. And so that transaction can represent the one-time gift, and it doesn't rely on any other objects. But if we have a recurring gift, and that is something that was not directly solicited, it was solicited through mass market outreach or something else, but it does represent a commitment to continue paying every month, and we want to have a record of that commitment so that we can make planning around cash flow or whatever else we need to make planning around. We can have a representation of that in our system, and so that would be something that could be represented by a commitment that has a commitment schedule that is a recurrent, I mean, that has a recurrent schedule. And we know that every month on this day, we can anticipate having another installment of that particular commitment. And so that obviously also doesn't need the opportunity. It can exist without an opportunity being created. And then we have the major gift or grant model, something that we are working with a major donor, working with a granting organization, and we are soliciting that grant. We're building the relationship. We're negotiating the terms of it, and so once that development officer has finished with that opportunity and marked it closed won, they can pass it off to a donor operations person who is working on scheduling that commitment, understanding what the fulfillment schedule looks like, as far as if it's a 2-year grant or however, or 3-year grant, or however the installments are going to happen. They can schedule that out, and then they can collect the transactions that represent the actual money coming across the door in our organization. So this is something that is really, really exciting, but the complexity does, but it does introduce complexity in reporting. It introduces complexity sometimes in operations, and it mostly introduces complexity for those of us who are used to using one object to manage all of these processes. So once we get used to it, it gives us a lot of flexibility, and we'll hit the next slide. So what does this look like in the system? I have a few different pieces. We've all seen the opportunity, and we know this. We know that what an opportunity looks like from a solicitation perspective. But we can see in the on the left that that process of Alex Garcia was solicited for $10,000. He made a commitment and then he's making installments every month on that commitment. So in the middle, we can see that gift commitment record. It's talking about about Alex and about this recurring donation that Alex has created. What it tracks it back to the campaign, and then we can see the upcoming gift transactions that are going to happen, and we can forecast those out. We can then see a individual transaction here, and we can see that this individual transaction has a transaction due date. In this particular case, there was no due date. It was a one-off donation of $14,200, and it was paid. And so we're able to manage all of those different pieces independently, and be able to see them on another of the industry common components that Dar will talk about later on this timeline on the left, which is giving us a whole view of all of the different components. And so the complexity is there, and then there are common components that are going to help us to manage that complexity. If you go to the next slide, we'll talk a little bit about what we've done in the fundraising best practices. In this, we didn't create a lot of assets or items that you might want to install, or tools, but we did do a lot of work on understanding how to model common use cases, and understanding some of the gotchas that we've run across. And so in this particular in this particular section, we've gone through single payment gifts, multi-payments, recurring, matching, inbound grants, etc. And we've gone through some of those use cases and put together kind of the base of what you need to have in place to make these things work, as well as the configuration and setup that you might want to go through in order to make these things happen. We'll
All
turn it
right,
back to
back
Laura.
over to finally, for our therapy session on where people get stuck in nonprofit cloud, we've got Omni Studio and industry common components. It's okay to say no. If you are not familiar with NPC, remember it's an industry cloud. You cannot avoid Omni Studio and common components. And if you're not sure what these are, I'm going to explain that in just a second. Okay, first up, a little bit of history. I find for nonprofit cloud, and Toby and I have been trying to do this throughout the presentation, kind of explaining why things are the way they are really helps people work with nonprofit cloud better. So the reason that Omni Studio exists, let's start with the history of industry clouds. Industry clouds exist because of a company called Velocity. Velocity developed tools for industry verticals, and many were based on Omni Studio. They developed several common components around it, and that worked across 6 to 8 verticals that they had developed, managed really big managed packages for automotive, financial, healthcare, manufacturing, all these big ones. And they did it so well that Salesforce bought Velocity in 2020, and that's where industry clouds actually come from. They're from that purchase of Velocity. So industry clouds have Omni Studio baked in there. Omni Studio has multiple tools, but the 4 main ones that folks tend to run across are the purple and the blue. And if you are colorblind, for folks, that is the top 4, the digital experience and service management. So flex cards, OmniScripts, integration procedures, and data mappers. That's usually how most folks encounter Omni Studio. These can do some really nice data manipulation, both inside of Salesforce. They can pull in data from external services. They can also do what's called Omni Out, so they can push these items out onto external websites. So it's a whole suite that does a lot of cool things, but it can be more complex. So let's dive in a little bit. I'm going to do a little bit of high level on Omni Studio and talk about how it appears in Nonprofit Cloud. And then we'll dive into industry common components. Flex cards are so pretty. This is where most people see Omni Studio surface in Nonprofit Cloud. And it's the very pretty little details that appear on some of the pages. They're called flex cards. I have some examples on the screen highlighted with the bands around them on the screen. And they kind of give you an idea of what flex cards can do and what OmniScripts can do. These are much nicer in appearance than Flow, but also they're a little bit more complex for folks to construct because they run on JSON code, which is not something you're really going to encounter unless you're a dev in other places in Salesforce. So you kind of have to learn the basics of JSON code to work with OmniScripts, or at least be able to muddle your way through it. So does that mean you have to know Omni Studio to do Nonprofit Cloud? No, you do not. Don't panic. You don't have to learn Omni Studio. You can just say no to it. You can learn it if you wish, and if you find that you're good at it, or you find that it provides value for your clients, go for it. And you also can kind of hit a middle ground. And I saw that Toby, you posted data mappers will always be data wrappers to me in the chat. Data mappers, you may see some references as data raptors. That's what they were called for years in Omni Studio, and it's a way more fun name because you can use little dinosaur emoticons, but they changed the name to data mappers. But in terms of Omni Studio, you could hit a middle ground. There are some nicely packaged out of the box elements of Omni Studio. For instance, the one on the left, that's a flex card on program management. It's on the benefit object in the program management feature set in Nonprofit Cloud. It's already designed for you. It already has an Omni script and everything. You just need to activate it. You don't have to do anything else. So there are parts of Nonprofit Cloud where you can use Omni Studio without much effort. Fundraising acknowledgements and receipts, they're a little bit more complex to configure, but they come with fundraising. They've already got the OmniScripts configured. They've already got the data mappers configured. You really don't have to do anything with them but clone them and activate them. So you could have Omni Studio working in a few parts. If you decide that you don't really want to learn Omni Studio, you can still use it in a few places. If you want to go the middle ground, you might have heard that DocGen is available for free in Nonprofit Cloud. That is true. It requires a $0 SKU add-on, but it costs you nothing. It is, however, based on Omni Studio and does run on JSON. To quote Michael Klodner, it's free like a puppy. So it's free, but it does require more effort to implement. But you could hit a middle ground there too. You could use it, and I have used it with clients for letters of agreement in grant making, where you really just need a single data mapper and a single Omni script. And I was able to do it with one client running one data mapper and one Omni script, doing letters of agreement in 5 different languages. Because if you think about it, it's the same pieces of data in every letter of agreement. You just need it to appear in different languages. And they did it for 14 different grants. So they had nearly 80 letters of agreements running off just one data mapper and one Omni script that we had to make in Omni Studio. So that could also be a middle ground for you if you want to experiment a little bit with Omni Studio. Or form framework for grant making. You now can choose to use that with Flow instead of Omni Studio. So you could say no to Omni Studio altogether if you're doing grant making. So there's different ways you can have Omni Studio appear or not appear in Nonprofit Cloud. You don't have to learn it, but you can if you want to. So it's an optional thing. It's got a lot of advantages. Again, it's really pretty. It has really nice UI. It's got some interesting related things that you can work with. Business Rules Engine, Data Process Engine came out of Omni Studio, but you don't need to know Omni Studio to use it. DocGen again, there's also Intelligent Document Reader, Advanced CSV Import. There's lots of things that kind of sprung out of Omni Studio. So it's worthwhile at least being able to understand what it does. But you also want to think carefully before implementing it. How much does this increase your project or cost timeline if you need to go and learn Omni Studio first? And how hard might this be for a nonprofit admin to maintain? So think about those things when you're thinking about Omni Studio. In terms of nonprofit cloud best practices, we do not plan any resources on Omni Studio at this time. They're just too complex and varied for nonprofit use cases in terms of how people might want a flex card done or how they might want the data mappers for letters of agreements. Those can just be really complex, so we're not going to go there with nonprofit cloud best practices group. And I see that question in the chat, but I'll get it afterwards. All right, next we wanted to talk about, for one of our last things on dealing with nonprofit cloud, industry common components. You will not have seen these in nonprofit best NPSP nonprofit starter pack because they did not exist. They are unique to industry clouds, getting myself tongue-tied. They are unique to industry clouds, and there are tons of them. Just to give you an example, on this page alone, we've got 5. On this page, we've got another one. Here, Toby showed you this earlier, Actionable Relationship Center. That's an industry common component. The flex cards that I just showed you, that's an industry common component. On this list of things in Nonprofit Cloud, there's about 17 on this page. There's a lot of industry common components, and there are a whole lot of choices that you could make when you're dealing with industry common components. As of spring 25, there's actually 34 of them, and that's not even counting what are considered industry common components of the feature sets in Nonprofit Cloud: fundraising, grant making, outcomes management, and program and case, and now volunteer management. Those are considered feature sets. So there are 34 of these things. You don't have to use all of these though. These are always coming. There's always new ones coming, but this is more like a buffet. Sometimes we find when folks dive into Nonprofit Cloud, they think they have to use all the things. You don't have to use all the things. Use the things that make sense for you, or if you're a consultant, your client, to use. And some of them might have functionality that's similar, and you might need to choose which one you want to use. For example, some layouts you could choose timeline, or you could choose actionable relationship center. Both of them, an art graph or a timeline, would show how records relate to each other. Or you could just go with old school related lists. It's going to depend on your use case. You might find that actionable relationship center graphs that you use for relationships are also really good for showing how other objects relate, like say in outcomes management. Some of these are going to be simple to set up. Milestones and events, really straightforward to set up. Some of these require a lot more setup, like Business Rules Engine, Form Framework, Data Processing Engine. So you've got anywhere from simple to complex on your buffet here. You don't want to eat the whole buffet. You want to take the things that work for you out of a buffet. In terms of Nonprofit Cloud best practices, we're going to be working on some of the more common ones like art graphs for common use cases beyond the out-of-the-box ones that come. And then we might tackle some of the more complex ones like advanced CSV can be used for multi-object import templates for fundraising. So we might do some use cases and examples for that. And if that sounds a lot like NPSP Data Importer, for those of you used to NPSP, you are correct. That is actually the replacement for it in Nonprofit Cloud. So you can do a lot with industry common components, but you don't have to use all of them. You will no doubt use some of them. There really isn't a way around that, and you shouldn't try and just avoid industry common components because they can do a lot for you. They add a lot to the product, but you don't have to use everything out there. This also gives you an idea of how complex NPC can be, those 34 things plus the original feature sets. That's a lot with all of the ICCs. And also for a tip for those of you who are thinking about the NPC exam, learn your ICCs. They will be on the exam. One of the reasons these exist and why these are such a valuable tool in NPC kind of goes back again to that chart I've got up on the screen of the differences between how you make a managed package like NPSP and how you make an industry cloud like Nonprofit Cloud. NPSP is just installable packages, but Nonprofit Cloud is one of the industry clouds, so it can share features across industry clouds. So for instance, fundraising that was developed for Nonprofit Cloud is now used by Education Cloud. Health Sciences developed a really cool provider portal for dealing with providers that now is available for Nonprofit Cloud for nonprofits that deal with a lot of providers or that deal with human services where they're needing to track or refer things to providers. The folks on the NPC team didn't have to develop that. They got to basically go and steal it from Health Sciences Cloud. So that shared development can be a huge advantage for Nonprofit Cloud, and that's why we keep getting more and more of the industry common components, and that's why we'll continue to see more and more of them. But don't let them overwhelm you. It's a buffet. Choose what you want. You don't have to eat the whole thing. Toby.
So our next steps and the things that are coming down the pike as we are moving through our nonprofit community best practices group, we have launched and have in progress program and case management assets. So we've already published a comparison chart. We've already published a mapping deck to help you to understand how to put your programs into program management. And we have those under development use cases and some guidance on individual use cases for setting up program management. And we'll start working on case management soon. Reporting subgroup has started. We're hoping to publish those fundraising reports towards the end of the summer and then start moving on to some of the other reports after that. The next items that we have in planning is attacking grant making and industry common components to focus a little bit on those. And then one of the pieces that is new to Nonprofit Cloud that we didn't have access to in the managed packages is outcomes management, and it's really pretty exciting as well. We'll have some more general and fundraising items that we're adding as well. And there is always room for interested parties to contribute to our team. So this is one of the opportunities we will extend to you if you want to email us at npcbestpractices@gmail.com to get involved in the team outside of joining a sprint. That's a great way to do it. We also have a sprint, virtual sprint coming at the end of this month. That is another great way to get involved. Our particular group is full for that sprint, but there are still some spaces that just opened up for some other groups that are part of the program if we want to get involved in the common sprints and see what it's all about. It's pretty fun. At this point, we'll switch over to answering questions from you if anybody has any. And we've also extended the link to the hub as well as the link to the presentation. So I think we'll open it up for anybody who has follow-on questions that you'd like to have Dar and I take a swing at.
We'll also send a copy of the slides over to Debbie. We'll do a PDF of those if that's easier.
So we have a question: must Data Cloud be in place for NPC to work properly?
You want to take it, Toby, or you want me to?
You go ahead, Dar. I'm happy to
I'll
as well.
take it. No, you do not need to have Data Cloud in place for NPC to work properly. It is optional. If you wish to use the segmentation object, and it can really enhance the way that outreach source codes work with campaigns, then you may want to look at Data Cloud. For those of you exploring Agentforce, Data Cloud is required for Agentforce that is independent of nonprofit cloud. So the answer is no, you do not have to have it, but you can certainly use it. Next
The
question, Toby, I'll give this one to you. Or do you want to
All
add
right.
more there?
No, that's great. So Jana would like to know where to find information about the volunteer management part. Volunteer management was released in this cycle. The part that was released is a data model, and the permissions the licenses that are required to access that data model through nonprofit cloud as well as through Experience Cloud. It does not have a lot of automation built on it yet, and that is coming in future releases. To find out more about it, you can look at help document. The help documentation has a section on implementing Volunteer Cloud, and then the nonprofit cloud developer guide also has the data model there, as well as some object references for volunteers. The one thing I'll say, I've already started using it with a couple of clients, and the one thing I'll say that's very exciting about this particular component, that this particular part of the package that they've released, is they've learned some of the hard-won lessons from the last couple of iterations, and the dependencies on the different objects have been made a lot more flexible, and there's very few, if any, master detail relationships. So it's an extremely flexible data model. Think that program management data model that we've bent around so many use cases over the past few years. This one is every bit as flexible, if not more flexible, and is really pretty exciting.
And I put a link to the data model for volunteer management after Jana's question in the chat. All right, Toby, I think both of us are going to need to answer this one. Can you migrate from NPSP to NPC, or is there a phased best practice for this? I'll go first, then you. Yes, you can migrate from NPSP to NPC. In fact, my entire job at Salesforce is making this easier for folks. Phased approach, honestly, it's per client. It really depends on what you're doing in NPSP. Did you just have fundraising? Did you just have a small instance? Did you also add in program management? Do you have case management in there, outbound funds? That would make it a much larger migration. So there isn't a set model for any one instance, because your nonprofit is going to have something implemented differently than others. You need to check whether or not your integrations are compatible with NPC, and if not, do you want to switch to a different product? There is an implementation guide for NPC, as well as a migration guide that just covers the fundraising data migration pieces, because NPSP without the additional packages is just fundraising and stakeholders. So it covers that. I'll find the link to that. Toby, what would you like to say about that one?
No
Gonna weigh
notes.
in?
Perfect answer.
Next one, I'll toss this one to you, Toby. Can you get Omni Studio / Industry Common Components as an add-on license to Sales Cloud?
It depends on the industry common component, but there are some things that have kind of made their way into different products. So if you think of case management managed package, they had actionable lists in there. So there's a few that have made their way into some of the other products. But that's not true across the board. So it really depends on which particular one that you're talking about. And Dara, I'm going to need to flip it to you for Omni Studio if there's a licensing that you can get. I think it's only part of industry clouds.
Correct. In the last True to the Core at Dreamforce, David Schmear, I might have the person wrong, guy on a chair, who who works at Salesforce and leads one of the divisions, I just forget his name, I think it might have been David Schmier, said that he would like to have Omni Studio be in other parts of Salesforce, but as of now, it is still in Industry Cloud. So I don't have any other information on that, but as of now, it's still just Industry Cloud specific.
There's been a few questions about Omni Studio, and I think I'll pick up just on what Dar said in her part of the presentation. And this has been an evolving type of decision matrix for me on how and when to use it. And the output of Omni Studio is Lightning Web Components. It is a declarative way to develop Lightning Web Components. And as you start to think about that, you have two different questions: does this reduce the cost of acquisition, and does this reduce the cost of ownership? Where I am sitting now, I don't feel like this. I mean, like using Omni Studio reduces the cost of acquisition too significantly, because it's still a fairly complex development process. It does reduce the cost of ownership, because it is a declarative environment where you can look and understand how somebody put together what it is that they put together in Omni Studio. So that's kind of the calculus that I've arrived at. And other people may have other opinions, but that's just to give an opinion on that cost of ownership of Lightning Web Components. That's kind of where I am.
All right, Mark has a question. Out of curiosity, has anyone done any work on how NPC best links to integrations, particularly with the usage of person accounts? There is a business process API that comes with nonprofit cloud that ISVs make use of to integrate with. But also integrations with person accounts have been around for quite some time, both Marketing Cloud and Pardot, aka Marketing Cloud Account Engagement, but we also call it Pardot. It has always worked with person accounts. There are a lot of packages out there, even some nonprofit specific ones, such as some of the association management software, that has always worked with person accounts. I'm not sure if you were looking for something more specific there, Mark, or a particular integration you were thinking of, but I would say look at this, the specs for the business process API for nonprofit cloud, and just in general, working with person accounts is sort of a long-standing thing outside of NPC that there's documentation for from Salesforce.
The biggest thing to get your head around with person accounts is that the contact object has not disappeared. It still exists. It still operates just like it always has. It's just a matter of, does your integration, excuse me, does your integration leverage that account relationship of the contact? And if so, that's where you'll start to get in trouble. But if you're really just interacting with the contact object, there's not a lot of impact for those types of processes. So it really has to do with what your integration pattern looks like, and taking those things into consideration. The one area that we know causes lots of problems is anything to do with fundraising for integration, because now there's 3 objects. There used to only be one object. So if something integrated in with that in the past, it's going to have with the fundraising objects in the past, it's going to have a problem unless it's redesigned.
And I would say the other thing about integrations with person accounts is, particularly if you're using marketing automation, think about where you put your fields. If it pertains to a person, you're probably going to need to put those fields on the contact object, and then they'll pop up to the account object with an _PC field. Like Toby mentioned, contact is still there, but a lot of marketing automation suites will want to look at the contact object. So be aware of that when you're working with integrations. You might need to locate some of your fields there for marketing automation or other integration to grab them off of contact, but they'll still be available at the person account level. They'll still surface there. All right, we've got a big one next. Just to clarify, orgs on NPSP don't have to migrate to NPC, correct? Do you have thoughts on when to consider migration and when not to? Toby, you want to try first? Do you want me to?
No, I'm happy to take that because I'll give it a big. I'll give it a big. It depends, and that there's a certain amount of risk to moving to entering into the decision to migrate to a new platform. There's costs involved with it. There's blood, sweat, and tears that will go into this. It's a big undertaking. There's also a certain amount of risk to sitting on a package that is doesn't have a lot of active development in it. They're not stopping supporting it. They're continuing to support it and fix bugs, all of those types of things. It's not going away. There's tens of thousands of nonprofits who are using it, and so that's not necessarily the risk, but just the noting that there's no more innovation that is coming to nonprofit success back carries a certain amount of risk. So generally speaking, and these are generalizations, and mileage may vary. So I put all of those things in places. If something is not working in your nonprofit success pack, if you are adding functionality, you're going to make an investment in moving programs onto your platform where they weren't there before. If you're undertaking a change operation, you want to at least consider the opportunity to change platforms as part of that decision-making process. We've done lots of consultations with folks about, is it time to change? Should I move to nonprofit cloud? And I can't tell you that 100% of those were, yes, you should move to a nonprofit cloud. We definitely have advised people to continue what they're doing in nonprofit success pack because the challenges that they were facing had to do with adoption and not necessarily with functionality. And so, they're undertaking a major change operation in a organization that doesn't have real good adoption or doesn't have really good processes in place didn't necessarily make sense. So it depends on your situation, but just know there are risks with staying as well as risks with moving. So it is that ground is unsettled as far as how to make the decisions, and it's a time of having to really think through. So
No, the only thing I'll add there is to reemphasize that NPSP is not going away. I'm going to put on my Salesforce hat. We have absolutely no plans to get rid of NPSP, nor to discontinue support for it. And I think somehow that rumor keeps going around that support is going to be dropped. That is not true. As Toby noted, there is simply no more major development going on it. But it's certainly getting bug fixes. It is certainly getting maintenance, and it will continue to always be out there. There are no plans to get rid of it. And in terms of migration, if I put on I used to be head of IT for various nonprofits hat, if I had a 13-year-old package and I now had a new one that was 2 years old, yeah, in most cases I would seriously consider moving, just because you want to start looking at the new features. And 13-year-old code is a way of doing things 13 years ago. That may still be stable for you, but you want to start looking at the new features. But like any other platform migration, doesn't matter if it's Salesforce, you need to plan it properly and make sure that you treat it as any other IT tech project. It's not just like flip the switch, turn it on, and you're done. It's like any other platform migration in IT. All right, we have a question from Mark. Did you say you were working on more assets like sample use cases for case management? I'll take that one. Yes, we are. The program and case group is active, and they are actively working on those. Toby, I think that's what they're focusing on right now, correct?
On the active use cases for program management.
Program. I think they haven't gotten to case yet. I think they're still on program,
Sure.
But yes, they are going to be working on case as well. So that is coming. Mark, to be honest, I was largely thinking of the B12 Beaufort 12 Mailchimp integration in Slack. My guess is for B12 that it will just need to triage to the contact object on the person account. And then Ben posted that it does indeed work with person accounts, as did Toby. Again, most of the marketing automations have worked with person accounts for a while, just because they've been out there for a while. Doesn't matter that MPC is only 2 years old. Person accounts are about a decade old. So you'll find a lot of the specifically marketing automation tools will work with person accounts, but always double check. You always want to check, and if it's not listed on the App Exchange listing, help the manufacturer, the developers, and make sure it does. Almost answered. Last question I think we have, and then we can do ducks. Are all of the ICCs available as part of the NPC license, or are there some that are an extra cost? All of them are that I had listed. Let me back that slide up. These are all free. In some cases, you might have to get an extra license activated. So for instance, the document generation, you just need a $0 SKU added on for that. So there are some instances where there's a $0 SKU added on for it. But everything on this slide is a freebie, comes with it.
Yeah, and there are pieces that are only part of grant making or have been only part of grant making, and some of those are being just kind of moved back into move back into the main licenses as well. So stage management, form framework are two of those that pop to mind.
Yep, they're currently, as Toby noted, grant making only, but they're going to become part of the main thing. When you look at the documentation for industry common components, or you'll see them listed as industry common features, there's a lot. They don't all come in nonprofit cloud. I think there's around 70 of them. They don't all come in nonprofit cloud. So make sure the one you're looking at actually does come in nonprofit cloud. So go back to the nonprofit cloud documentation and make sure that is part of nonprofit cloud, because there's some other cool ones out there that aren't necessarily licensed for nonprofit cloud yet. And then we have a hand up. We've got Debbie. Debbie, was it the question you have in chat? Do you want to say that?
Yeah, sorry, I just thought I'll put it in the chat. You know how some things have usage costs, don't they? Like, say, if you put surveys on, you can get so many for free, and then it costs you. Are any of those items like that? Would you know?
So for nonprofit cloud, if you use Data Cloud's its own thing with consumption costs. The one that stands out for me for nonprofit cloud is data processing engine has a 30-hour limit per month. Things process very quickly on it, so it offloads to the Einstein Wave Analytics processing platform, and most things process in a few seconds, and then it comes back. But there is a 30-hour limit. You can get that increased. Toby, anything else that pops out at you as having a limit like that?
No, I mean it's the limits are usually when you're moving things off the platform. So if you're moving things into Data Cloud, for some reason, I mean into Data Cloud, there are a few things that use that data processing engine time limit that you just kind of want to be aware of. Those are the things that I think have consumption costs aside from like you say surveys. If we just think through some of the things that are part of kind of every license, you have one prediction still available to you. And anything additional you need to pay for. There's and then there's all the AI type of stuff and the agent force type of stuff that enters you into some consumption costs from the Data Cloud side as well as from the Einstein platform or actions that you pay for. But to use the main functionality, there's aside from that data processing engine 30-hour limit, which I haven't hit yet. So there's that.
Excellent. Thank you.
We've reached the end of questions.